Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hillcrest Tennis YouTube Live. We're here on this beautiful Thursday early afternoon, and today we are going to be discussing court position and where you should be hitting the ball depending on your court positioning. So first off, really depending on your court position, that will decide and dictate what type of ball you will hit. And so our job is to try and place the ball into a spot that will allow us to set ourselves up for the next shot, or to recover and to have a better opportunity to get back into the point or back into position. So I hope that you all can see this. I'm going to move you a little bit closer here. There we go. Okay, so here I've kind of mapped out a court, and so we'll talk about this portion here in just a minute. But really what we're going to be talking about right now is the red zone, the yellow zone, and the green zone. So we think of it kind of as a traffic light. And so the red zone, we have 3 different zones within that red zone. Okay, we have the defense, which is basically 6 feet back and beyond the baseline. And then we have a neutral zone, which is from about baseline to about 4, 5, 6 feet. Okay, and then we have the offense zones, which is about 3 to 4 feet inside that baseline. Okay, so when we're in the red zone, we are waiting for our opponent to do one of 3 things: change direction, make a mistake, make an error, or hit the ball short. So, for example, if I'm in a neutral position and my opponent is also in a neutral position, we are now waiting for the other person to either hit into the yellow zone here, your opponent to hit into the yellow zone, or to make a mistake, or change direction of the ball. So, if you're rallying cross court, changing direction so that they would hit down the line, that's kind of what we're waiting for. Okay. Now, but we're going to talk about defense. So this little guy, my little magnet here, is going to be our tennis player here. So if I'm in a defensive position here, and so typically what happens is, if we're going to look down here to our numbers, typically what happens if we're in a defensive position, if we're playing doubles or even singles, so we're in a defensive position, typically what happens is, if you can see, a lot of times we're hitting in this 5 zone here. So in this kind of little house shaped. Okay, so when we're in a defensive position, this is what happens. We hit in the middle of the court, nice and short, for our opponent to now move into the yellow and green zones. Okay, so now if we're in a defensive position out here, out wide, okay, the tendency is for our opponent, or for yourself, to hit down the line because we think that's the open spot. That is not the case. Okay, so if we were to hit down the line, our margin for error is less than a foot. Okay, but if we were to hit cross court to zones 2 or 3 or even to 4, now we have a better chance of getting back into position, and we hit to a higher percentage ball. And so now we give ourselves an opportunity to get back into neutral and get ourselves back into the point. Okay. All right. So when we're in the neutral position, okay, we're really trying to make sure that we're hitting to the to the zones 3 and sometimes 4. Sometimes hitting up that middle nice and deep gives us an opportunity to push our opponent back, so then it can open up the angles for us on the court. But really, we're trying to hit to 3 so that we have the opportunity to step into our offensive spot in the red zone or transition into yellow. Okay. So neutral is really trying to set yourself up for success by hitting the ball nice and deep, and pushing your opponent back into that defensive spot. Okay. Now, once we step into our offense, now we can really dictate play. Okay. So now you're in the offensive spot, and your opponent is now moving back to that defense. And just like what we talked about, it opens up the court, and it gives us more options. Okay. Now, the yellow zone. The yellow zone is where it's a love-hate relationship here, because the yellow zone is a transition zone. So you should be transitioning into green. So you should be moving forward. You should always be moving forward and through yellow. You never really want to be stuck in that position unless you're taking a ball out of the air mid-court to set yourself up to come to the green zone. But really, yellow should be a transition ball. This is where we get into trouble. A lot of times, a lot of players hang around this service line area, and that is the most dangerous spot on the court, because if you look at it, the angles, your opponent has more angle and more court to hit to. But if you can close that angle, yes, they may be able to lob, but now you have more angle to hit to. So you're able to hit to 1 and 2 over here. Okay. So being really, really aware that hanging around that service line is really not the best positioning. And also it will limit your shot selection. And most of the time you're going to be hitting balls at your ankles rather than from your knee to your waist height. So the ball that you hit will be more difficult if you're hanging around at this yellow zone right here at the service line. So you really want to be using that yellow zone as a transition spot, hitting to high margins. So if you're transitioning from yellow, you want to be hitting to zones 2 or 3 over here. You really don't want to be hitting to 4 or 5, for a lot of obvious reasons. You don't want to be hitting the ball right up the middle. It's kind of a dangerous spot, especially if you're transitioning forward. Okay. So, and then once you get to that green zone, now we're really opening up the court for ourselves. Okay. So when we talk about angles, we've talked a lot about this V. So if you were to extend this line right here, extend this line to the service line here, okay, extend it. Now if anything beyond 2 and 1 out this way, now you've drawn your opponent off the court, and now you have the whole court open to hit that next shot, even if they were to get it over. And so the more you can hit here or here or here, the better. And the easier it's going to be to hit those shots, because you're closing in, and the closer you get to the net, the more angle you have. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those angles. Okay. And so a little bit about the angles. So there's a few zones here. Okay. And so if your opponent, okay, so if your opponent hits it to zone 0, so there's 4 zones, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And we can also show it on here. So zone 0, Okay, zone 0, if your opponent hit, this is your opponent, zone 0 is any half of this court over, okay, as you can see here, okay? Zones 1 is basically the middle of the court over to zone 3, okay? Middle of the court to zone 3, all right? So as you can see here, zone 2, we're going to be taking it, you know, to number 2, obviously, okay? And then zone 3 is basically number 1 right here. So the more you can develop the feel for the angles and bringing in your margin for error. There should be an imaginary line going down the side of the court here. It's about 3 feet inside from the singles line, and that's your percentage margin for error. So it's 3 feet in will give you the highest percentage, and you'll be more effective if you can hit to 3 or 2 or even 1 if you're in zone 1, green zone. So anyway, just really that tennis IQ that we've talked about before, trying to develop that tennis IQ and recognizing where you are on the court so that you can make wise decisions on your shot selection and not getting caught up in the emotional part of it and worrying about like, well, I'm worried that they're going to move at the net, or I'm worried that they're going to lob me if I'm transitioning into green from yellow. No, recognize where you are on the court, but more importantly, recognize where your opponent is, because they will give you cues as to what they are going to do. And if you can recognize the shot that you hit and how that affects your opponent, now you can anticipate and you can transition into certain positions and then in turn hit a more effective ball for your next shot. So anyway, I hope this helps. Be smart with those shot selections. It will help your winning percentage go up if you can be more mindful and more intelligent about how you make those shot selections. And then also using those angles. Angles is a huge part of tennis. It's a sabotage tactic, because if you can use the angles to draw your opponent off the court, now you're giving yourself an opportunity to hit to a bigger target, and more of like a fairway rather than trying to hit over the water and into the cup. So as a golf analogy. So anyway, I hope that helps. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks.